Hello, I'm David Yetman. In the time of the COVID pandemic, I'm here with my friend and celebrity chef, Janos Wilder. We are far enough apart that, Janos, we can take off our masks.
Always so nice to see your face.
You know, but you're so distinguished.
Oh.
The first lecture features a friend, colleague, and a longtime acquaintance of mine, Gary Nabhan. Gary really needs no introduction. He's a MacArthur Fellow, a Pew Fellow, and a celebrated professor at the University of Arizona, but he also knows a lot about food. And you're going to tell us what Gary knows about food.
You know, I always learn so much from Gary. Every time I talk to him about food, I do a lot of work in this area, but he's the man. And so we're really going to be demonstrating, he's going to be talking about how native and ancient foods are the foods of the future, particularly in times of climate change. And so we're going to do a dish that illustrates how you can use the foods from yesterday in dishes that you're going to want to eat today and tomorrow.
You know, that's a theme that's really going to be going through all of the programs that we're doing, is that the most important foods in the Southwest aren't new.
No, that's right. They go back a long way. That's why we are a city of gastronomy.
Well, great to see you. Another chance to renew our friendship for 30 years.
I know, we go back a long way.
Yeah.
This is so fun. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And you've inspired all of this that we're going to be preparing. So you sent me emails and said, Gary, what would you like to cook? So people say, oh, do something with fish, or do a type of taco. I got the most exhaustive list from you. It was fantastic. So what are we cooking?
Well, good. And I think we're a distance away enough that I can pull this down.
Yeah, we could take these off, absolutely. Well, now I get to see my friend's face. That's so nice.
Yeah. And I just want to say to everyone, I'm so grateful to be here for this Food for Thought series. I'm Gary Nabhan, and I work both at the Southwest Center with many of our friends in this series, and at the Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill, where we have a mutual colleague.
Yep, who was just here with me.
Ben Wilder, who is the director of the lab that I work at, and it's just a delight to have that interaction with Ben as much as it is with you.
Well, thanks so much. Okay, you wanted to focus on ancient foods and bring them into the future. How looking backwards is our best way to look forward.
That's right. My friend Pati Colunga from Mexico says, our future is ancestral in terms of bringing back the most treasured elements of the Mesoamerican and desert American diets and integrating them into the future because they're more water use efficient, they're preventative of diabetes and heart disease, which all of us care about, and they're absolutely delicious, as you'll show us here in a few moments.
Well, that's how we met.
That's
was
right.
Talking about these things and Native Seed Search, and that's how I got on the board of Native Seed Search. That was 25 years ago, probably.
Well, I have to say that those foods sat there as seeds that people had little garden plots of and enjoyed in their houses. But it wasn't until you showed us all what we could do with this incredible potential of textures, flavors, and look at this, gorgeous colors.
I know.
That really brought it back on the map. Even before Slow Food started to do this nationally, we're so grateful that you were doing this here in Tucson in the Sonoran Desert.
Well, you brought me the products, and the chef cooks them. You brought them, and you were responsible for bringing them back to life.
Well, thank you.
Keeping them alive, and so that's awesome. So you said, okay, let's use some of these guys. So what are these?
These are dragon fruit, a kind of vining cactus. But we also have some punch made of a pitaya that's like the organ pipe cactus that grows in Arizona. Another kind of organ pipe or pitaya that's from Jalisco, and that's a punch that we'll put in a special drink that you've designed for this occasion.
Yeah, we're going to make a great drink for this. So we're making a bruschetta. And so the bruschette's going to have on it, we just use the bulbs of these Mexican green onions, the dragon fruit, or pitaya, fresh pineapple. This is lamb,
Oh, my favorite, of course.
I know it is. I know it is. And cactus pads.
Wonderful.
So nopalitos, we just cut these down.
Oh, that's
So-
great. What a great idea for bruschetta.
So we're going to. So I use these skewers. I made one. I'm gonna make another one right now. So if you're going to use wooden skewers, you don't want them to burn. So soak them in water. So we put these in
that's
water
great.
last night. So
That's
just
great.
soak them in water. So we're gonna. So then you often see brochettes with like one skewer, but I don't think that's a good idea because everything will twist around, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
use-
That's a common problem.
Use 2 skewers. So we're gonna thread that down there. Then we're gonna put this beautiful lamb. So I actually took this lamb off of lamb T-bones.
Oh, how great.
So there's the filet mignon on one side, the New York on the other, and they're just the perfect size.
And we raised Navajo churro sheep up in Flagstaff for 10 years, so
I know
I'm
you
really
did.
fond of lamb.
Oh, and it's my favorite meat as well, I have to tell you. So now we're going to, another of the nopalitos. Now we're going to put on this dragon fruit. So this is peeled and we
What I
cut it
like
in
about
cubes.
this selection is that more than half of the plants you have in the mix are desert or tropical succulents that retain the water and the flavor in their tissues.
I think that's what you had in mind.
That's right. So the nopalito from prickly pear, the cactus, the portulaca that's on a side dish, and of course pitaya or organ pipe fruit, like the agave here in front of me, the mescal, are all succulent plants that use only 20% of the water that conventional crops use. That's why these things will be part of our future diet more than they are today in the United States. They're already big in Mexico.
I just always loved, not on an intellectual level and a practical level and an emotional level, that you tie the past to the future. And that, it's tied, it brings everything all the way around and we come full circle. And so I love that about what we're
Well, and I think agaves and mesquite and prickly pear are some of the oldest things. Yeah, let me move back some.
Okay, I'm just get this pan hot. Well, that pan's heating up. We've got tepary beans in here.
Great.
So these teps, okay, so now they're like low water usage, right?
That's right.
And they can go forever without water, and then they get some, boy, they're springing up out of the ground, right? These things do, on the other hand, they do take a lot of water to cook.
That's right. They're slow cook, slow foods.
Right, they really are. I started these beans last night at 5 o'clock. 10 o'clock, said, no, I'm going to bed. And we put them on for another 3 hours this morning. I wasn't smart about it. I should have just done the pre-cook method, which is to blanch them and then take them off. It takes a lot of time off of it.
I call them the desert tortoises of the bean family.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, so now I'm going to make a glaze for this.
Oh, great.
So this is another cactus. This is prickly pear, organic prickly pear syrup from our friend Sherry Romanowski at Sherry's Desert Harvest.
Who may have the largest prickly pear harvest in the country, right on the foothills of the Santa Ritas.
It's immense. It's immense. This is organic. This is organic. This is a brand new organic product that she's using.
Great.
So she's got a little space she works out of, but it's not a little business. She's buying the organic sugar by the pallet.
Wow.
And that's not the first ingredient in the list.
Well,
Okay, so now
she,
we've got
like
some
you,
lime
was a
juice,
real pioneer in all of this.
she's
She deserves a lot of credit.
some fresh garlic.
Now, a lot of people wouldn't think of prickly pear syrup and garlic together. That's a great combination.
This is going to make the glaze that we're going to use on this. And this is the Neubauer's, Santa Cruz Chili Company, red chili powder, which I've toasted previously. So toasting powders is like toasting seeds or dried chilies. That's what starts bringing out their oils and their flavors. And so it also
okay.
takes away the sort of raw flavor that you might have in there. And we're going to put a little bit of agave syrup in here to sweeten this up just a little bit more. So we've got the lime in there, the prickly pear, the agave. This is starting to smoke, and that is ready to rock here. So I'm going to take this over here, put this down in, and this one in, and then a little salt.
I was with Jeannie Neubauer down at the Santa Cruz Chili factory last Friday. And she has a
How's she doing?
fine, but she has a terrific new chipotle mango dish that's like a harissa, a Moroccan
Oh, really? Well, there
sauce,
you
and
go.
it's just as good as anything I've ever tasted.
She does great work down there. I just love working with her. So we're going to just brush this glaze on here.
That's great. My Lebanese relatives, for their shish kebab, use pomegranate syrup glaze a lot of times.
Okay.
So same thing.
Same idea. That makes
Yeah.
total sense. We had some, we got some Mission Garden white pomegranates today.
Oh, great, great.
Whoops. Let's be a little more careful there.
That's why you want 2 sticks, though.
Yeah, really. So what we're going to do here is, because of with this glaze has got a high sugar content, we'll burn faster than we're going to cook.
That's right.
So I'm just turning these, not, boy, he's cooking that fast. No, I'm not cooking it that fast. But I'm searing it quickly, and I'm going to keep turning it, and then we're going to finish it in the oven. So we get this glaze into, oh, look at that. Oh, it surely smells good, doesn't it? And all that pineapple's going to caramelize.
Oh, I know. That's a great thing about pineapple.
And look at these, look at the green onions are already softening a bit.
Most people don't realize that pineapples are a succulent plant just like cactus and agaves. I was just down on a historic pineapple plantation that goes back to the 1680s in Jalisco.
Really?
And they're growing all these wonderful trees in the overstory over pineapple, and the flavor of the pineapples grown in that kind of orchard system is just remarkable.
So what is it about that? So is there, what's the different about that system that makes that, how does that work?
Well, the way we grow pineapples today in Hawaii or in California perhaps is a lot like how we grow the blue tequila agaves. They're in monoculture with no shade. And you know this from the discussions and debates about shade-grown coffee versus open sun coffee. The pineapples just have a richer flavor and higher Brix content when they're grown in the shade of the overstory trees. And we're finding that the mezcal agaves like this that have mesquite and guamuchil and other trees that put the agaves in partial shade also enhance the flavor of the agaves, just because there's a greater buildup of flavor as the agaves mature. Same way with grapes. You want a slow maturation to get the flavor components at their highest peak.
It's good. Slow and proper gets you the best results.
That's right.
Every time. Every time you try to rush it, something's going wrong.
That's
right. Can't
That's
rush
right.
nature. Well, let's do this. That's in the oven. All right, we're gonna make a cocktail.
Great.
All right.
I'm all for this.
All right. So I'm going to take, so we're going to make this drink, and you turned me on to this, Gary. This is sort of the Mexican answer to Douglas Rodriguez and the mojito.
But this is a bat-friendly mojito.
And a bat-friendly mojito. Okay, talk about bat-friendly. We spent a week in Michoacan last year learning about bat-friendly mezcals, and so I bet people don't know about that.
No, it's something new, but it's something really wonderful. And that's that our friends are now letting their agave plants for mezcals like this one flower and seed so that the bats can come, rather than cutting the flower stalks and harvesting the plants before the plant fully matures. So tequila is really infanticide. You're killing the plant before it fully matures. What they're doing is letting the flower stalk come up, the bats come to it, and the same thing with people who are growing the pitaya fruit. They're allowing the bats to come to their fruit. They get a higher percentage of seeds, higher Brix content in the fruit, and more fruit per acre if they let the bats pollinate their crops. So the bats win, but we also win because the flavor in these agaves used for mezcal and the fruit made for punches like this is enhanced. The Brix content is higher and the flavor component is higher.
And you've got something that's sustainable.
That's right. And so it's drinking a cocktail in the late afternoon without any regrets. You're helping nature and you're enjoying it at the same time.
Oh, okay, so what do I have in here? I have in here fresh mint, lime juice, a little simple syrup, a lot of lime. The limes I put in, not just the lime juice, I put in the limes. I'm muddling these limes. And I'm muddling all that mint and releasing its flavor. I'm going to put a little more in here.
But I never thought about muddling the lime too. That's a great idea because I love the lime flavor in mojitos as well.
Okay, just smell that.
Oh,
That
that's
lime,
divine.
that
The
mint's
lime
coming
and
through.
the
You got the
mint
lime and the
together,
mint.
just wonderful.
Oh my God, okay, this is going to make a fantastic drink. Okay, so we're going to talk to us about this.
This is from a relative of the pitaya or organ pipe that we know grows down by Ajo, Arizona. But this is the tropical equivalent, really arid subtropical equivalent that grows in the coast of Jalisco, another Stenocereus cactus like the others that Dave Yutman has studied. And so this is made into a punch in Guadalajara, but this is a bat-friendly product from Techulata, Jalisco, that's the source of a beautiful cottage industry there. And this is only the second or third year that these products are getting into the US. You can use dragon fruit syrup or fruit pulp the same way. And that's now available in most Tucson grocery stores.
Yeah, and we were able to get some fresh too.
That's right. Like these are the dragon fruits. And as you can see, very few or no spines at all. They probably trim a few off. But now we get these frozen in a fruit puree and as a juice in Tucson.
So I've muddled all this. We've got those great flavors coming together. Take our muddler out, get it out of the way here. And now let's pour this over some ice. Oh, that's a nice flavor. Nice color there. Then we're going to top it off with a little agua mineral,
Okay.
a little fizz to it. Put a little mint on there, a little garnish.
There could not be a better drink for a summer evening, could there?
No. All right.
And we have
And our meat's almost ready.
to practice our Sonoran Spanish. It's not mi hijito, it's two words. It's Mijito.
Mijito. And what does mijito mean?
My little boy, my
My
little son.
Yeah. Oh, well, we can take a sip and then we'll bring out that lamb.
Salud y provecho. Oh, that is to die for.
Oh, that's refreshing. That's delicious.
If I had to survive alone in the desert, this would be my drink of choice.
Oh my gosh, I could drink a lot of those in an afternoon. That's fantastic.
No.
All right.
This is a drink for climate change. The crops in it use only 20% of the water as what goes into beer or whiskey, and so it will probably rehydrate you for longer than beer or whiskey.
All right, Scott, it's super refreshing. Okay, so these are the tepary beans. We're going to put down these tepary beans.
Beautiful. And do you spice tepary beans or?
Oh, so actually, I'm glad you asked that because I cooked these with onion and garlic and bacon.
And bacon.
And bacon.
That's how I grew up eating beans, those three. But I've noticed that most Sonorans and Tahanoatan people put a little bit of salt.
Oh, salt. I put salt
yeah.
towards the end of the cooking.
But with tepary beans, I don't think they use much epazote or chile, maybe a little bit of Mexican oregano now and then.
And I didn't use any of that in this, but yeah.
I think they stand on their own.
Yeah. So I'm going to get
that's
this
just
out of the way.
stunningly beautiful.
All right, but we have another little fun thing happening here.
I like the squarishness of the pieces with the sort of punctuation of the onions. That's really nice.
So these are verdolagas. Did you call them by another name?
Portulaca has the English name. Oh, I know it. I use it now and then. Purslane.
I never knew that name.
Purslane.
Purslane, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, purslane, yes.
We used to sell it into the Flagstaff Farmers Market, and people from every nationality, from Israel, from Iran, from Morocco, from Italy, would say, oh, I miss that so much, I thought it only grew in our country. And it grows literally every place in the world, even in the sidewalks of Santa Fe and Tucson.
So where I first got turned on to this was probably before Rebecca and I were married, and we'd gone down to visit her parents in Nogales, and we made a little detour into Sycamore Canyon.
Oh,
and we
that's a
were
great
hiking
place.
in Sycamore Canyon, and Rebecca, what is all this stuff? It kind of looks like watercress, but it's not. What is this? And this is the verdolagas that grow wild in the washes after it rains.
That's right. So we're having spanakopita with verdolagas and quelites tonight. Instead of using spinach,
Oh, wow.
we're featuring the same purslane or verdolagas.
So
Oh,
there
that's
is
so beautiful.
our dish.
Oh, that's to die for.
And our
That's
drink.
so beautiful.
To you, Gary, thank you so much. You've taught me so many things over the years.
Well, my pleasure, and it's all fun. If learning could be this fun all the time, we'd have everyone in the world as lifetime students. So
That's right.
cheers.
Cheers.
Well, greetings, everyone. I'm happy to be outside for this little session. Learning and teaching outside is one of the oldest traditions that humans have. In fact, Socrates and Aristotle did their teaching while walking through a grove of trees. And we're close to that here. We're being sheltered by mesquite trees. But that word that we use all over the world, academia, the academy for higher education, comes from a word in Greek that means learning together while walking through a grove of trees. Here we're on the edge of the forest of the Patagonia Mountains, in southeastern Arizona, about 50 miles south of Tucson. And this is the aboriginal lands of the Soba O'atam, or Sobaipuri, who are related to the people at Sanavir, just south of Tucson. So this is indigenous land that we're on. It's also land where some of the first land grants, Spanish land grants, in what is now the United States, were shaped for ranching in southern Arizona. So this is a landscape rich in history, but also rich in biological and cultural diversity. And that ties into the discussion today, which is about how the ancient menus of foods that people have eaten in this place for thousands of years have significance to what the future of agriculture will be in this arid region. So we're saying, in a sense, as my friend Patricia Colunga says, the future is ancestral. To go back to a time before people pumped water and moved food around the world with such high energy costs, we may learn things that can help us prepare for a more resource-efficient and climate-friendly food system for all people in the deserts, but particularly for the people here in the Sonoran Desert region. That is sort of the nursery grounds for the Southwest Center and many programs at the University of Arizona. And I'm going to be talking about what we can learn from past inhabitants of this desert that we can somehow integrate into the future, not by culturally appropriating parts of it, but by looking at the very principles that guided their food system. So let's think about that for a moment. What were the core values and knowledge systems that helped people live in this landscape prehistorically? Well, first of all, they understood that this is a hot, dry climate compared to many in both Mexico and the United States. In fact, we now know that we're facing record temperatures this summer that are higher than any recorded throughout human history in this desert. We had 50 days over 110 degrees this summer, the summer of 2020, and that had a tremendous effect on the crop yields in this county, Santa Cruz County, but in Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas as well. So they have known for hundreds of years that you adapt to that heat and drought rather than trying to escape it, as we have with modern agriculture the last 100 years by pumping water that created a microclimate that was cooler for crop production, but at a tremendous environmental cost. We salted up soils, we depleted groundwater aquifers, we temporarily cooled down our fields, but we actually raised the temperature of the surrounding landscape because we did very little carbon sequestration in that landscape. A good part of the year it was barren with the heat and the radiation of the sun bearing down on it. So the last 100 years has sort of been a failure in making agriculture truly adapted to desert regions. If we go back beyond that, though, for, well, really 4,000 years, we've had an agriculture that is sensitive to the heat and drought, the kind of soils that we have here that are sometimes low in fertility, but also have pockets of very rich fertility. And they used a wide set of native plants as crops and as useful weeds. I don't like the word weed, but let's call them useful wild plants that grew in crop production areas, and created a diet from those plant resources that's actually much more diverse than the diet that most of us draw upon from grocery stores. That may seem ironic because all of us can draw upon foods from anywhere on the planet in a grocery store like a Whole Foods or a Safeway. But really, most of us eat a very narrow number of crops, and that is the same set of crops that are now eaten all around the world, and very few of those are the plants from the desert. So the first thing was people knew how to adapt to the environment rather than remaking the environment to fit the crops. The second thing that people did was they knew how to take soil fertility, for instance, the mulch and leaf litter that comes from under mesquite trees, and to bring that into the fields where they were growing crops so that there would be higher nutrient levels and greater soil fertility and greater soil tilth, which means that the soil was soft and easy to work. Another thing that people knew how to do was to bring the rainfall into the fields rather than just accepting the rainfall that dropped on the fields. And in many places, right where I'm sitting, there were side canyons where people could get 40 to 50 times the annual rainfall by channeling the runoff or the temporary floods that lasted for a day or two into their fields by diverting it out of washes into the floodplain soils adjacent to washes. And that's what we now call water harvesting or rainwater harvesting. And that's what we're doing with the 5 acres here in Patagonia, drawing upon the slopes to generate rainfall and runoff that then we concentrate in our planted areas. The third thing that people did really well here was to rely on a diversity of crops that all had different periods of maturation so that they didn't mature all at the same time, but were staggered over the year. Historically, the O'odham or Pima and Papago people of this area actually had at least 2 planting seasons, some of them 3, so that they had crops in the ground year-round. And again, that's what I do here in Patagonia. This agave or century plant doesn't look that edible to most Americans, or at least Americans north of the U.S.-Mexico border, but it's one of the oldest foods in the New World. 8,000 years at least of people eating the roasted hearts. It almost looks like a pineapple when you cut the leaves off and then roast the leaf bases and the core or the heart of the plant. This is now in many foods, even though you don't see it, either as agave syrups or an agave starch or carbohydrate called insulin that's added as a powder and a thickener to many different kinds of foods. And of course, we're not just drinking tequila in the Southwest these days, we're drinking a number of mezcals and a number of fermented beverages made with agaves that have been around for centuries, but now their popularity is back. So this doesn't look like your average agricultural field anywhere in Arizona, but this may be what the future of agriculture looks like in southern Arizona. Elderberry, sunflowers, prickly pear, agaves, wild herbs, pomegranates, quinces, and figs that can all use less water than our conventional crops, but produce year after year, even for decades, and produce the same amount of edible biomass over time. Here you can begin to see what a perennial agriculture might look like. We have columnar cacti. Some of these are from South America, ones that David Yetman recommended to me, mixed with agaves, prickly pear. And then in their understory, we're planting the wild chilies or the chiltepines, mostly under trees like the desert willow or mesquites that you can't see from this view, but that are all around this place. We have pomegranates, we have okra, we have plums and elderberries and peaches and sand cherries from Mexico, as well as 15 kinds of agave, 20 kinds of prickly pear, and about 35 kinds of pomegranates, all desert adapted. None of them need as much water as conventional crops grown in Arizona today. So this is the future that is part of our ancestry, part of our ancient past in the desert, and we're bringing it back to life here, up at Biosphere 2, and in many places where we're collaborating with Sonoran people, including the Concockerseri Indians, to grow these crops again for food security during a time of COVID and during a time of unprecedented heat waves. So many of you know that the indigenous peoples of Sonora and Arizona grew corn, beans, and squash. But that is really sort of a truism or a trope that negates the incredible diversity of plants that they were actually drawing upon to create a desert diet, what we call the arid American diet, which was one of the most diverse ones in the world, but it was also rich in plants like agaves and prickly pear and cactus fruit. Here's one that isn't from the Sonoran Desert, the dragon fruit. But cacti and agaves actually made up as much or more of the diet than corn, beans, and squash did for most of the last 8,000 years here in the desert. Why is that important? Well, those are the plants that we may need to return to in the future to cover the bulk of the agricultural acreage that we have in Arizona and Sonora, because they're so water use efficient and so heat tolerant compared to most conventional crops. Let me say that another way. A plant like an agave uses only 1/6 to 1/4 of the water to produce the same amount of edible biomass that corn does. If a plant is 4 to 6 times more water use efficient to produce the same amount of edible foods, why would we not want to plant it? Especially when it's been something that has worked out here for people for thousands of years. Agave murphyi that the Hohokam grew on the slopes of the Tortolitas and on the slopes of Tumamoc Hill is one of the most celebrated examples, but we now think that cacti like the fishhook cactus, prickly pear, cholla, and some of the columnar cacti were grown in different parts of the Sonora and Arizona landscapes. Now, we may think that those don't look very edible when we drive past them at 50 miles an hour on our way down to Rocky Point or Keno Bay. How can you eat a cactus or an agave as a staple? Everyone knows about tequila and mezcal coming from agaves, but we don't think of how many other food and beverages also come from the agaves or century plants and also from the prickly pear. So now in stores we have agave syrup. This is organic fair trade agave syrup, but there's many more food products that come from that. Even up until 50 years ago, every family that produced tequila took the roasted cabezas or heads of the agaves from the roasting pits and brought that home to eat as a dessert, just like many people eat fresh sugar cane around the world, removing the sugary, smoky, wonderfully flavored pulp from around the fibers of each agave leaf and eating that as something between a dessert and a staple, really. I use an agave powder called inulin every morning along with fruit and cereal in what I eat for breakfast. And that reduces blood sugar levels and blood cholesterol levels and improves the metabolism of our guts. It actually is a probiotic that stimulates all the microbes that help us digest and absorb our food, and it frees up the nutrients so that they're much more accessible to us of things that would normally just pass out of our body. So agaves will definitely be part of what we see in the future here in this landscape, and it looks as though people planted as much acreage in agaves and cacti in the Sonoran Desert as they did corn, beans, and squash. You'd never know that by how that's taught to us by archaeologists and historians, but now the archaeological record and the nutritional record is showing that that is true. Another plant that was used as a staple for the last 6,000 to 8,000 years is the tree above me that produces these mesquite pods. Now, many of you know that mesquite is in certain kinds of barbecue chips as a smoke or a flavorant. And of course, some of you are adventurous enough to have tried the mesquite flavored coffees, beers, tortillas, pinoles, health foods and snack foods that are now available in Tucson. There's about 40 different products from mesquite that are now available in Metro Tucson. And many of you know that one way that we utilize mesquite is by grinding the pods into a very smoky, sugary flour, but it really doesn't have that much simple sugars in it. What mesquite has in its carbohydrates are something called galactomannan gums, the same that are in carob pods that are used all over Europe and the Middle East as one of the major ways to reduce the blood sugar levels of people who have diabetes. Now, that may not seem like an important thing to do for the general populace unless you think about how diabetes is affecting the Southwest and northern Mexico right now. Mexico now has the highest levels of diabetes and childhood obesity of any country in the world. And the southwestern states from Texas to Southern California also have diabetes and childhood obesity as their major health risks in Hispanic, indigenous, and even African American populations who live here in the desert. And mesquite, agaves, prickly pear, and the other cactus fruits and pads can help reduce that without the need of artificial insulin or other pharmaceuticals. So what we're saying is, why don't we redesign our desert agriculture to include the plants that can prevent the most common diseases in the Southwest using less water and fossil fuel and artificial fertilizers, and produce from those desert-adapted plants the things that we need most in our diet to prevent the meteoric rise in health costs that are already happening. It's basically using desert foods as preventative medicine to deal with the most significant health costs that we will see in the future here in the desert. Now, there are other foods I should show you first before I turn to another food. These are mesquite crackers and mesquite cornbreads that are also rich in seeds like chia. That is another desert plant that grows very well here with a minimum of water. So these are actually delicious foods, nutritious, but also acceptable to the American palate. When we've given blind taste tests of brownies made with mesquite versus carob versus chocolate, young children up till the age of 8 actually prefer the flavor of mesquite over chocolate. And this gives you a sense that we've trained our minds to think that some foods are delicious, but the ones that are back doorstep that are certainly delicious have been largely ignored by the media in the United States. Not so much in Mexico anymore. Another food that has been cultivated now for about 50 years in the Southwest is a wild chiltepine, or wild chili, the chili del monte, that grows right up into this county, Santa Cruz County. Its wild range doesn't reach to Tucson. It's in Organ Pipe and the Babiquiveries and the Tumacacri Mountains, but nowhere else in southern Arizona. So this is the ancestor of chilies that reaches its northernmost range right here in the borderlands counties, from here over to West Texas. And of course, many of you know that there are special salsas that feature chiltepines. The price per pound of the wild chilies to make these salsas is something like $72 a kilo. If you grow that with 10,000 plants an acre, you can make more money off growing chiltepines than you can growing marijuana. But you have to work on the hand harvesting or mechanical harvesting on a scale that works, and you can't just grow chiltepines in the open sunlight. You have to grow them under trees like mesquite or hackberry or elderberry, so that they get shade part of the day and are protected from freezes in the winter. So here's something already in our economy that we're importing from Mexico, where we could grow it over tens of thousands of acres in Arizona, and there's a huge demand for it. Why? Wild chilies are not only food, but again, they're medicine. They're high in antioxidants and things that we need today, because most of the emerging diseases that are becoming more prevalent with climate change and heat waves and droughts are diseases of oxidative stress, which is to say that the more things like chiltepines and wild oregano that we have in the diet, the more we will be able to tolerate and defend our bodies against that kind of stress. Diseases of oxidative stress are skyrocketing, and they're one of the major reasons that people in Arizona go to emergency rooms in the summer when we have heat waves, because they're not only dehydrated, but their bodies really can't take the radiation and heat stress that they're facing. So some people are actually doing some remarkable things. This is a hot sauce that has not only chiltepines in it, but cactus fruit. And I think we're going to see not only some wonderful products that combine agaves with cactus fruit, with chilies and oregano, but we'll also see those things grown together in what we call perennial polycultures, which means that we're intercropping or companion planting wild chilies and cacti under trees like mesquite and hackberry and elderberry. Why is that important? Well, there's a concept that agricultural ecologists have come up with called over-yielding effects, which means that if you grow just one crop on an acre of land and you get a certain yield for it, when you grow multiple crops that have compatibility with one another in that land, you actually get a bump up of yield rather than competition between those crops. That the combined yield of the three is greater than the highest yield that you could get from any single one of those crops. And that means that we're having agriculture that looks more like an orchard of succulent plants like agaves and prickly pear and columnar cactus, along with trees, then it looks like an open field of corn or beans alone. And this is what we've jokingly called a slow agriculture that produces the kind of slow foods that are now being celebrated all around the world. Rich in taste, rich in health benefits, very low energy and water inputs to grow them. They take more time to initially mature but then they produce for decades afterwards. Some of the columnar cacti can probably produce fruit for 200 to 300 years. The agaves for 15 to 20 years. The mesquite tree for 50 to 100 years. And so these food crops that are really at our back door are like the desert tortoise that won the race in the old parable or fable that most of you heard about when you were kids. They looked like they were moving slowly, but they were slow and steady. And while other crops require a lot of inputs, fossil fuel, fossil groundwater, they eventually burn out because of the scarcity of those resources, where these food crops can produce year after year over decades or even centuries without being replanted. That holds the soil in place, it sequesters carbon in the soil, but at the same time it produces delicious foods with reliable yields year after year. So this is a whole different way of looking at food production and our entire food system than we've grown up thinking about. If a Midwestern farmer came out and saw some of the fields that are producing more food and more money than he or she does in Iowa, and it's filled with tall cacti and gangly mesquite trees and wild chilies and wild oregano growing under those trees, and tepary beans, wild or cultivated, and chia and other things growing in the understory. An Iowa farmer might think, that's a mess, I don't want to try it. But if people can survive with greater income than they could in what they now get from an Iowa cornfield, and produce health benefits that outdistance anything that a single crop like corn or sorghum or wheat can do alone, I'm for it. Paradigm shifts, though, come with a lot of pain to societies that are conservative. A lot of people say, you're talking about a big change not only in how we grow food, but what we eat. Will people really accept that? And all I want to ask you, any of you that are over 40 years of age, is do you remember when white bread, like Wonder Bread, was the only thing in American grocery stores? What kind of breads do you eat today? Did your grandparents say that white bread would be the only bread forever? They probably thought so. But now we have breads with a dozen different kinds of grains in them that your grandparents never heard of. Emmer and einkorn and white sonora and chia seeds and flax seeds all mixed into our breads. The same thing with our beverages. My father probably only drank one kind of beer his whole life, and now in every neighborhood in Tucson you can get 20 to 50 kinds of beer. And it's not just about beer, it's about mezcal. It's about old probiotic beverages that are delicious and nutritious for you in the summer, like tepache and tezuino, some of the most ancient beverages that were drunk here in the Sonoran Desert were probiotic that actually increased the microbial diversity in your gut and helped keep you healthy and resistant to diseases at the same time. Now, most American families this year, because of COVID, have had astronomical health costs and disrupted work schedules. We're talking about a slow agriculture where we won't see those boom and bust cycles in our agriculture or in our health. Who can argue against that kind of future? We've seen the devastating effects of being hit by a disease because we have become a monoculture with very few metabolic defenses in our own bodies. We not only need to take care of that problem through probiotic foods that help us with our gut diversity and our overall health, but we need to do that in our fields so that our crops don't go down with one disease and destroy a whole industry in 1 year. So over the next 10 to 25 years, I think we're going to see a stepwise change in agriculture to water-efficient, heat-tolerant, desert-adapted crops, and we will not be impoverished by using crops that draw on less water and less energy to produce our food, because the foods like dragon fruit and chiltepines with cactus syrup in them and mesquite breads and crackers are as delicious as anything you can taste on the face of this earth. So I welcome you to think about a new diet, a new agriculture that are actually some of the oldest diets and oldest ways of farming in the deserts on this planet.